The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and there she was again. Jessica Martinez stood perfectly still in the corner, her dark eyes fixed on me with that unsettling intensity I'd grown to dread. Her lips curved into what most people would call a smile, but I knew better. It was the same expression a spider might wear while watching a fly struggle in its web. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Good morning, David," she whispered, her voice carrying that familiar sweet poison that made my skin crawl. "I saved you a spot right here next to me." I hesitated at the threshold, my laptop bag suddenly feeling heavier in my grip. 3 other employees quickly shuffled past me into the elevator, each avoiding eye contact. They knew. Everyone at TechFlow Solutions knew about Jessica's obsession with me, but nobody dared to speak about it openly. After all, she was the VP of engineering, and I was just a senior developer trying to keep my head down and do my job. "Actually, I think I'll take the stairs today," I said, stepping backward. "Need the exercise." Her smile faltered for just a moment, revealing something darker underneath. "David, we both know you live on the 15th floor of your apartment building and never take the stairs there. Why start now?" The fact that she knew where I lived and which floor sent ice through my veins. I'd never told her my address. Elevator doors began to close, but Jessica's pale hand shot out, stopping them with a soft thud. "Get in, David, please." The word please sounded more like a command wrapped in silk. 6 months ago, life was different. 6 months ago, Jessica Martinez was just another face in the crowded Austin tech scene. Someone I'd met at a networking event at the convention center. She seemed normal then, attractive in a professional way, with her perfectly styled black hair and sharp business attire. We talked about machine learning algorithms and the future of software development. Nothing romantic, nothing personal, just 2 professionals sharing industry insights over overpriced convention coffee.
Ow.
But Jessica had interpreted our conversation differently. Very differently. The first sign should have been the friend request. On every social media platform I'd ever used, including ones I'd forgotten I had accounts on, then came the messages. Innocent at first, asking about work projects and industry trends. But they grew more frequent, more personal, more invasive. She'd comment on photos from years ago, like pictures of me at my college graduation or family barbecues. She somehow knew my schedule better than I did, showing up at the same coffee shops I frequented, the same gym I attended, even the same grocery store I shopped at on Sunday mornings. "David, what a coincidence seeing you here," she'd say with that bright smile, as if Austin wasn't a city of nearly 1 million people and these encounters were truly random. The breaking point came 3 months ago at the Grind Coffee House, my favorite spot near Riverside Apartments where I lived. I was working on a personal coding project, enjoying the peaceful Sunday morning atmosphere, when Jessica appeared at my table like a shadow materializing in daylight. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, already pulling out the chair across from me. "I was just thinking about you." "Jessica, I need to be honest with you," I said, closing my laptop and looking directly into her eyes. "I think there's been a misunderstanding between us. Not interested in dating you or anyone right now. I'm focused on my career and personal projects. I think it would be best if we kept things professional." Her expression didn't change immediately. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her dark eyes searching my face as if looking for some hidden meaning behind my words. Then, slowly, her smile transformed into something that made the coffee in my stomach turn cold. "David, you don't mean that you're just scared of commitment because of what Jennifer did to you?" Jennifer Adams was my ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago. I'd never mentioned her to Jessica. Ever. The fact that she knew about Jennifer, knew about our relationship and how it ended, meant she'd been digging into my personal life far deeper than I'd realized. "How do you know about Jennifer?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, David, I know everything about you. I know you drink black coffee every morning but switch to green tea after 3 p.m. I know you listen to lo-fi hip-hop while coding and that you have a scar on your left shoulder from when you fell off your bike in middle school. I know you're afraid of commitment because Jennifer cheated on you with your roommate. And I know you haven't dated anyone seriously since then because you don't trust easily. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. Some of these details I'd never shared with anyone. Others were things from my distant past that would require serious investigation to uncover. The scar on my shoulder wasn't visible unless I was shirtless, and the only photos of it existed in old family albums. Jessica, this is stalking. What you're doing isn't normal or healthy. I'm asking you to stop. Shh. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. David, you don't understand.
Ow.
We're meant to be together. I've seen your apartment. I know how lonely you are. Why, I've watched you sitting by your window in the evenings, staring out at the city lights. You need someone who truly understands you, someone who cares enough to pay attention to every detail of your life. The image of her watching me through my apartment window made my blood run cold. I stood abruptly, knocking over my chair in the process. Several other customers turned to look, and Jessica's demeanor instantly shifted back to sweet and innocent. David, please don't cause a scene. People are staring. Stay away from me, Jessica. I'm serious. Don't contact me, don't follow me, and don't show up wherever I am. We're done. I grabbed my laptop and walked out of the grind, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my car keys. Through the window, I could see Jessica still sitting at the table, that same unnaturally calm smile on her face as she watched me drive away. For 2 weeks, blissful silence. No messages, no surprise encounters, no feeling of being watched. I started to believe that maybe my firm rejection had finally gotten through to her. I should have known better. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. My phone showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was unmistakably familiar. David, this is Jessica Martinez, VP of Engineering at TechFlow Solutions. I'm pleased to inform you that we'd like to offer you a senior developer position with our company. The salary is quite competitive, nearly double what you're making at your current position. My blood turned to ice water. At the time, I was working for a small startup called Codecraft, a company with maybe 20 employees total. TechFlow Solutions was one of Austin's major tech players. A company with over 500 employees and contracts with some of the biggest names in the industry. I'd never applied there, never even looked at their job postings. I didn't apply for any position at TechFlow, I said carefully. Oh, but you did. Our HR department received your resume and cover letter 3 weeks ago. It's very impressive qualifications, by the way. Your work on machine learning optimization algorithms particularly caught our attention. 3 weeks ago was exactly when I'd confronted her at the coffee shop. The timing wasn't coincidental. Jessica, I don't know what game you're playing. But Mr. Chen, I think there might be some confusion. This is a professional business call regarding a legitimate job opportunity. Perhaps we could schedule an interview so you can learn more about the position. Her voice had taken on that sickeningly sweet professional tone, but underneath it, I could hear the steel. This wasn't a request. This was a trap, carefully constructed and perfectly legal. I'm not interested.
Ow.
That's unfortunate.
David.
I should mention that your current employer, Codecraft, recently lost their biggest client. I believe they'll be conducting layoffs quite soon. It would be a shame to find yourself unemployed in this competitive market. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. There was no way she could know about Codecraft's client situation unless she'd somehow gotten access to confidential business information. But 3 days later, my worst fears were confirmed when Codecraft's CEO called an all-hands meeting to announce that their major client had unexpectedly terminated their contract. Half the development team would be laid off by the end of the week. I was one of them. The severance package was minimal, barely enough to cover a month's rent and expenses. In Austin's competitive tech market, finding a new position could take months, especially without the security of current employment. As I cleaned out my desk, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The offer still stands. We'd love to have you join the TechFlow family. It's Jessica, standing in the parking lot of my former workplace. With a cardboard box of personal items in my arms, I realized that Jessica hadn't just orchestrated my unemployment. She'd engineered it. Somehow, she'd manipulated events to back me into a corner where I had no choice but to work for her. That's how I found myself 3 months later, stepping into an elevator with the woman who'd systematically destroyed my life just to force me into proximity with her. As the elevator climbed toward the 8th floor where TechFlow's development team worked, Jessica stood unnaturally close to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume and feel the heat radiating from her body. "I've been thinking about your performance review, David," she said softly, her breath tickling my ear. "I think we need to schedule some private one-on-one sessions to discuss your progress." The elevator dinged at the 8th floor, and I practically lunged for the opening doors. Behind me, I heard Jessica's quiet laughter, a sound that followed me all the way to my desk. What I didn't know was that this morning, everything was about to change. What I didn't know was that Marcus Johnson, CEO of InnovateCore and Jessica's biggest rival in the Austin tech scene, was about to walk into my life with an offer that would turn Jessica's carefully constructed web inside out. The morning started. Like any other nightmare at TechFlow Solutions, Jessica had assigned me to a project that required constant collaboration with her. She'd repositioned my desk to face her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Glass office claiming it would improve team communication. In reality, it meant she could watch me constantly, her dark eyes tracking my every movement like a predator studying prey. "David, could you bring the quarterly reports to my office?" Jessica's voice came through the intercom system, even though she was only 20 feet away and could have icily walked over to speak to me directly. But that wasn't her style. She preferred the power dynamic of summoning me, making me come to her. As I gathered the documents, my coworker Amanda Rodriguez leaned over from the adjacent desk. Amanda was one of the few people at TechFlow who'd shown me genuine kindness since I'd started working there. She was a front-end developer with 10 years of experience and a sharp wit that she usually kept carefully hidden around Jessica. "She's been staring at you for the past hour," Amanda whispered, pretending to examine code on her monitor. "This isn't normal boss behavior, David, even for micromanagers." "Tell me something I don't know," I muttered, checking to make sure all the reports were in order. Jessica had a habit of finding mistakes in my work that didn't actually exist, using them as excuses for extended private meetings where she could corner me with her unsettling attention. "Have you considered looking for other positions? The market's pretty good right now for developers with your skills." Before I could respond, Jessica's voice cut through the office again. "David, I'm waiting." Amanda gave me a sympathetic look. As I walked toward Jessica's office, the glass walls were supposed to promote transparency and open communication, but Jessica had installed privacy film on the lower half, creating a barrier that blocked the view of anyone sitting inside. As I knocked on her door, I could see her gesturing for me to enter with that same predatory smile. "Close the door behind you, David. We have sensitive information to discuss." The moment the door clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room changed. Jessica's professional mask slipped away, replaced by something far more intimate and threatening. She moved closer to me, close enough that I could see the tiny flecks of gold in her dark eyes. "I've been reviewing your work from last week," she said, her fingers trailing along the edge of her desk as she spoke. "There are some concerning patterns I'd like to address." She handed me a printed report covered in red marks and corrections. As I scanned the document, my confusion grew. These weren't my mistakes. Someone had deliberately altered my code submissions, introducing errors that would make my work appear sloppy and unprofessional. "Jessica, these aren't the files I submitted. Someone's changed my code." "Are you accusing me of lying, David?" Her voice remained sweet, but there was steel underneath, because that would be a very serious allegation against your supervisor. I stared at the papers in my hands, realizing the trap I'd walked into. She'd sabotaged my work and was now using it as leverage. But for what purpose? What did she want from me this time? "I think you're under a lot of stress lately, Jessica," continued, moving even closer. You seem distracted, unfocused. Maybe what you need is someone to help you relax, someone who understands the pressures you're facing. Her hand moved toward my arm, and I instinctively stepped backward, bumping into the wall behind me. Jessica smiled at my retreat, clearly enjoying the way she'd cornered me in her office. "Jessica, this conversation is inappropriate. We should keep our relationship strictly professional." She tilted her head, as if considering the word carefully. Like the sound of that, David. We do have a relationship, don't we? A special connection that goes beyond ordinary workplace dynamics. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Jessica's expression shifted to annoyance as she called out, "We're in a meeting. Please come back later." Ms. Martinez, this is Kevin Park from Innovate Core. I believe we have a scheduled appointment. Jessica's face went pale at the mention of Innovate Core. I'd heard whispers around the office about the company, knew they were TechFlow's biggest competitor in the Austin market. What I didn't know was why the mere mention of their name would cause such a dramatic reaction in Jessica. "That's impossible," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "I don't have any meetings scheduled with Innovate Core." "Actually, you do," Kevin's voice came through the door again. "Marcus Johnson asked me to discuss a potential collaboration regarding David Chen's transfer to our development team." The silence in Jessica's office became suffocating, watched as her carefully constructed composure cracked, revealing something desperate and dangerous underneath. Her hands were trembling as she moved toward the door, and when she spoke, her voice carried a barely controlled rage.
Ow.
"There must be some mistake. David works for TechFlow Solutions. He's not going anywhere. Perhaps we should discuss this with Mr. Chen directly," Kevin suggested. "After all, employment decisions are ultimately his choice to make." Jessica's head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing with an intensity that made me step further back against the wall. In that moment, I saw the true extent of her obsession, the depths of her need to control every aspect of my life. The idea that someone else might offer me an escape route was clearly unbearable to her. "David doesn't need other opportunities," she said, her voice rising slightly. "He's perfectly happy here at TechFlow, aren't you, David?" The way she said my name carried an implicit threat. I could feel the weight of her expectations, the consequences that would follow if I didn't give her the answer she wanted. But something about Kevin's unexpected appearance had shifted the balance of power in the room. For the first time in months, I had options. "Actually, I'd be interested in hearing what Innovate Core has to offer," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my own voice. Jessica's mask slipped completely. For just a moment, I saw pure fury cross her features before she managed to regain control. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. "David, I think you're making a mistake. TechFlow has invested significant resources in your professional development. It would be ungrateful to abandon that investment for some uncertain opportunity elsewhere." She moved to her computer and pulled up what appeared to be my employment contract. As she scrolled through the document, her smile returned, but now it looked more like a baring of teeth. "Actually, I'm reminded that you signed a non-compete agreement when you joined our team. Any attempt to work for a direct competitor would result in immediate legal action. I'd hate to see you face bankruptcy over poor career decisions." My stomach dropped as I remembered the stack of papers I'd signed during my desperate job search. I'd been so focused on escaping unemployment that I hadn't carefully reviewed every clause in the contract. Jessica had known exactly what she was doing when she offered me the position. "However," she continued, her voice returning to that sickly sweet tone, "I'm willing to overlook any discussions you might have with outside companies, provided you remember where your loyalties should lie." The knock at the door came again, more insistent this time. "Miss Martinez, I really do need to speak with Mr. Chen. It's quite urgent." Now Jessica's jaw tightened as she realized she couldn't keep Kevin waiting indefinitely without raising questions from other employees. She moved to the door, but didn't open it immediately. "David, I want you to remember our conversation today. Think carefully about the choices you make and their potential consequences. Your future at TechFlow depends on your ability to remain focused on what's truly important." She opened the door to reveal Kevin Park, a tall man in his 30s with friendly eyes and a professional demeanor that seemed genuinely warm compared to Jessica's manufactured pleasantness. Behind him stood two other people I didn't recognize, both carrying tablets and looking like they meant business. "Mr. Chen, I'm Kevin Park, Head of Talent Acquisition at Innovate Core. This is Sandra Williams, our Chief Technology Officer, and Mike Stevens from our legal department. We'd like to speak with you about an opportunity that we think might interest you." Jessica stepped between us, her body language clearly territorial. "As I mentioned, Mr. Chen is currently in a meeting. Perhaps you could schedule something for later in the week. Actually, Sandra Williams spoke up, her voice carrying an authority that made Jessica pause. We've been monitoring some concerning patterns in the Austin tech community, specifically reports of employees being trapped in positions through manipulation and coercion. We're here to offer Mr. Chen legal protection and career opportunities that don't come with strings attached. The implication was clear. Somehow, Innovate Core knew about my situation with Jessica. The question was how, and more importantly, what they intended to do about it. Jessica's face had gone completely white, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to figure out how much these strangers knew about her tactics. I'm not sure what you're implying, Jessica said carefully, but TechFlow Solutions operates with complete professionalism and integrity. David is a valued team member who has never expressed any dissatisfaction with his position here. Kevin's smile was polite but knowing. Of course, Ms. Martinez, we wouldn't want to suggest otherwise. However, we believe Mr. Chen deserves to know about all of his professional options, especially given the unique circumstances surrounding his employment history. The phrase unique circumstances hit like a bombshell, as these people knew about. Jessica Stalking knew about how she'd orchestrated my unemployment and forced me into this position. But how could they possibly have that information? And why would they care enough to intervene? Jessica must have been thinking the same thing, because her composure finally shattered completely. I don't know what kind of corporate espionage you think you're conducting, but this conversation is over. David, return to your desk immediately. We have work to complete. Actually, Mike Stevens stepped forward, producing a legal document. From his briefcase, we've already filed a preliminary injunction regarding Mr. Chun's non-compete agreement. Our legal team has reason to believe it was obtained under false pretenses and therefore isn't legally binding. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jessica's sharp intake of breath. I stared at the document in Mike's hands, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. Someone was offering me a way out of the trap Jessica had so carefully constructed. This is impossible, Jessica whispered. But even as she said it, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. Whatever game she'd been playing, it seemed that Innovate Core had already figured out the rules and decided to play it better than she could. Kevin turned to me with a genuinely warm smile. David, would you be interested in taking a lunch break to discuss this opportunity further? I think you'll find our offer quite compelling. The conference room at Lone Star Bistro was nothing like the sterile corporate environments I'd grown accustomed to at TechFlow. Kevin had chosen a private dining area where we could speak freely, away from Jessica's watchful eyes and the toxic atmosphere she'd created around my daily existence. Sandra Williams spread several documents across the polished wooden table, while Mike Stevens opened his laptop to display what appeared to be a comprehensive legal analysis. David, before we discuss our offer, I think you should understand exactly what you've been dealing with, Sandra began, her voice carrying a mixture of sympathy and professional concern. We've been investigating TechFlow's hiring practices for the past 6 months, particularly focusing on cases where employees appear to have been coerced into accepting positions under questionable circumstances. She slid a thick folder across the table toward me. Inside were printed emails, financial records, and what looked like surveillance reports. My hands trembled as I recognized my own name appearing throughout the documents. Jessica Martinez has used similar tactics with at least 4 other employees over the past 2 years, Kevin explained, his voice steady but clearly angry. She identifies targets at networking events, develops personal obsessions, then systematically destroys their current employment situations too. Force them into positions where she has complete control over their professional lives. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't Jessica's first victim. This wasn't some twisted romance in her mind. It was a calculated pattern of predatory behavior that she'd refined and perfected over time. The others, I managed to ask, what happened to them? Mike's expression grew grim. 2 transferred to companies outside of Austin to escape her influence. 1 suffered a complete nervous breakdown and left the tech industry entirely. 4th is still trapped at TechFlow, too terrified of the legal and financial consequences to seek help. I thought about my coworkers, wondering which of them might be the 4th victim. Had I been working alongside someone else who was suffering, Through the same nightmare, both of us too isolated and frightened to recognize our shared predicament. "How did you find out about my situation?" I asked, still struggling to process the scope of Jessica's manipulation. Sandra exchanged a look with Kevin before answering. "Amanda Rodriguez reached out to us 3 weeks ago. She's been documenting Jessica's behavior toward you and became increasingly concerned about your safety and well-being. Amanda used to work for Innovate Core before transferring to TechFlow, and she still has contacts in our company. I thought about all the small kindnesses she'd shown me, the way she tried to warn me about Jessica's surveillance, her suggestion that I look for other opportunities. She hadn't just been a sympathetic coworker, she'd been actively working to help me escape. We've been building a case against Jessica and TechFlow's enabling of her behavior." Mike continued, pulling up several legal documents on his laptop screen. "Your situation gave us the final pieces we needed to move forward with both civil and criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "Stalking, harassment, corporate fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud," Sandra listed, her voice matter of fact. "Jessica didn't just manipulate your employment situation, David. She accessed confidential client information to orchestrate Codecraft's contract termination. It's corporate espionage and potentially wire fraud." The room spun around me as the full scope of Jessica's crimes became clear. She hadn't just been a disturbed individual with an unhealthy obsession. She'd been operating what amounted to a criminal enterprise, using her position and resources to systematically destroy people's lives for her own twisted satisfaction. "What do you need from me?" I asked, surprised by the determination in my own voice. "Right now, we need you to return to TechFlow and act normally while we finalize our evidence gathering," Kevin explained. "We're particularly interested in documenting any additional attempts Jessica makes to control or manipulate you, especially now that she knows we've made contact." The thought of going back to that office, of facing Jessica's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control, made my stomach turn. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't facing it alone. "We're also prepared to offer you a position at Innovate Core, effective immediately after we conclude the legal proceedings," Sandra added. "Senior software architect, 40% salary increase, full legal protection, and a guarantee that you'll never have to interact with Jessica Martinez in any professional capacity again." The offer was more generous than anything I could have imagined, but it also felt almost too good to be true. "What's the catch?" Mike smiled. For the first time since we'd sat down, "No catch, David. Marcus Johnson built Innovate Core specifically to compete with companies like TechFlow that prioritize politics and manipulation over talent and innovation. Rescuing skilled developers from toxic environments isn't just good business for us, it's personal mission." As we finished our lunch and prepared to return to the corporate battlefield, Kevin handed me a small device that looked like a standard smartphone charging cable. "This is a recording device," he explained quietly. "If Jessica tries to corner you alone or makes any threats, activate it by pressing the small button near the USB connector. Everything will be transmitted directly to our legal team." Walking back into TechFlow Solutions felt like entering enemy territory. The familiar lobby with its sleek modern furniture and inspirational corporate posters now seemed like set pieces. In Jessica's elaborate stage play, I could feel eyes on me as I made my way to the elevator, wondering how many of my coworkers were aware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes. The elevator ride to the 8th floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, I could see Jessica standing near my desk, her posture rigid with barely controlled tension. She'd been waiting for my return, probably watching the elevator indicators to track my arrival. "David, I need to see you in my office immediately," she called out as soon as I stepped into the workspace. Her voice carried across the entire floor, ensuring that everyone could hear the summons and witness my compliance. Amanda looked up from her computer as I passed her desk, her eyes conveying both concern and encouragement. She knew what Kevin and his team were planning, and I could see her trying to communicate strength and support without drawing Jessica's attention. Jessica's office door closed behind me with an ominous finality. She moved to her desk but didn't sit, instead, standing behind her chair like it was a barrier between us. Her carefully maintained professional appearance showed signs of strain, her usually perfect hair slightly disheveled, and her makeup unable to completely conceal the dark circles under her eyes. "I hope you enjoyed your lunch meeting with our competitors," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "I trust you didn't share any confidential information about TechFlow's projects or client relationships. It was just a casual conversation about industry trends," I replied, trying to match her composed tone while my heart hammered against my ribs. "Of course it was." Jessica's smile was razor sharp. "David, I want you to understand something very clearly. You belong here at TechFlow. You belong with me. These people from Innovaticore don't care about you as a person. They're just trying to use you as a weapon against our company." She moved around her desk, closing the distance between us with predatory grace. I could see the recording devices. Activation button in my peripheral vision, disguised as part of the charging cable Kevin had given me. "I've protected you, David. I've guided your career, ensured your success, created opportunities for you that wouldn't have existed otherwise. And this is how you repay me? By entertaining offers from people who want to destroy everything I've built." Her voice was rising now, the careful professional mask beginning to slip away entirely. I pressed the activation button and prayed that Kevin's team was monitoring the transmission. "Jessica, I think you're misunderstanding the nature of our professional relationship," I said carefully. "You're my supervisor, not my protector or guide. I have the right to explore other career opportunities." "Rights." Jessica laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "David, you have no rights that I don't grant you. Your employment contract, your professional reputation, your financial stability, your entire future in this industry depends on my goodwill. Cross me, and I'll make sure you never work in tech again." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you about reality." Jessica moved even closer, close enough that I could see the fury burning in her dark eyes. "Innovaticore can make all the promises they want, but I have documentation of every project you've worked on here, every mistake you've made, every security protocol you've potentially violated. One phone call from me and their job offer disappears permanently." The threats were escalating exactly as Kevin had predicted. Jessica was becoming more desperate and reckless as she felt her control slipping away. I could only hope that the recording device was capturing every word of her increasingly unhinged monologue. "You know what I think happened during your lunch meeting?" Jessica continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "I think Marcus Johnson filled your head with lies about me, made you believe that. I've done something wrong. But everything I've done has been for your own good, David. Everything I've sacrificed has been to ensure your success and happiness." "What have you sacrificed, Jessica?" Her expression shifted, becoming almost vulnerable for a moment. "I turned down a promotion at a company in Seattle because I couldn't bear the thought of leaving you behind. I've spent countless hours analyzing your work, identifying areas where you could improve, protecting you from criticism from other supervisors. I've dedicated my entire life to your well-being, and you want to throw that away for some false promises from strangers?" The delusion in her words was staggering. In her mind, stalking and manipulation had become acts of love and sacrifice. She genuinely believed that destroying my independence and trapping me in her web of control was a form of protection and care. "Jessica, what you're describing isn't professional mentorship or personal sacrifice. It's obsessive behavior that's harmful to both of us." "Harmful?" Her voice cracked like a whip. "David, I saved you from unemployment and poverty. I gave you a career, a purpose, a place where you could belong. Without me, you'd still be handing out resumes and begging for interviews. You caused my unemployment in the first place." The words hung in the air between us like an accusation of murder. Jessica's face went completely white, and for a long moment she simply stared at me in shocked silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "How did you find out about Codecraft?" In that moment, I realized that Jessica had just confessed to corporate sabotage while being recorded by Innovator's legal team. The trap that Kevin and his colleagues had set was closing around her, and she'd walked directly into it. The silence in Jessica's office stretched for what felt like an eternity. I watched as the color drained from her face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. She'd just admitted to orchestrating my unemployment, and from the look of dawning horror in her eyes, she was beginning to understand the implications of her confession. David, I. She started, then stopped, her hands trembling as she reached for her desk chair for support. You have to understand, I never meant for it to become so complicated. I just wanted us to work together, to have the chance to show you how perfect we could be as a team. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Even through her attempts at justification, Jessica was confirming everything that Kevin and his legal team had suspected. The recording device in my pocket was capturing every word, every nuance of her breakdown. You destroyed my job, Jessica. You manipulated confidential business information to terminate Codecraft's contracts and force me into unemployment. Do you understand that what you did was criminal? Criminal? Jessica's laugh was high-pitched and unstable. David, everything I did was motivated by love. You can't criminalize love. You can't prosecute someone for caring too much. Her delusion was complete and terrifying. In her twisted worldview, corporate espionage and professional sabotage became romantic gestures. Stalking became devotion, and manipulation became care. I realized that Jessica wasn't just dangerous because of her actions, but because she genuinely couldn't comprehend the harm she'd caused. Jessica, what you call love, the rest of the world calls stalking and harassment. What you call caring, everyone else recognizes as control and manipulation. The word exploded from her with such violence that I instinctively stepped backward. You don't understand what real love looks like, David. You've been hurt before, abandoned and betrayed. So you've forgotten how to recognize genuine devotion when you see it. She moved around her desk again, but this time her approach felt different, more desperate and unpredictable. I could see something unraveling behind her eyes, carefully maintained sanity finally giving way under the pressure of exposure. And confrontation. I know about Jennifer, about how she destroyed your ability to trust. I know about your childhood, about feeling invisible and overlooked. I've studied every detail of your life because I wanted to understand you completely, to love you in ways that no one else ever could. The depth of her invasion into my privacy was staggering. She wasn't just talking about publicly available information or casual observations. She was referencing personal history, emotional wounds, and intimate details that I'd never shared with anyone. The scope of her surveillance and research was both impressive and absolutely terrifying. How do you know about my childhood, Jessica? How do you know about things I've never told anyone? I made it my business to know. Her voice carried a note of pride, as if her stalking was an accomplishment to be celebrated. Medical records, school transcripts, therapy notes from when you were 16. I accessed everything I could find because understanding you completely was the only way I could love you properly. You accessed my therapy records. A violation felt like a physical assault. Those sessions had been my refuge during one of the darkest periods of my adolescence. A safe space where I'd worked through family trauma and social anxiety with a counselor I'd trusted implicitly. The therapist retired and sold her practice. Digital records aren't as secure as people think they are, especially when you know the right people to ask. Jessica's matter-of-fact tone made the revelation even more chilling. I learned about your fear of abandonment, your difficulty with emotional intimacy, your tendency to withdraw when relationships become serious. I studied you like a scholar. Study's a masterpiece. I felt physically sick as the full scope of her invasion became clear. She hadn't just been watching my current life, she'd been excavating my past, mining my most vulnerable moments for information she could use to manipulate me more effectively. Jessica, what you're describing isn't love or devotion. It's systematic violation and psychological warfare. It's preparation. Her voice rose to nearly a shout before she caught herself and glanced nervously at the glass walls of her office. Several co-workers were looking in our direction, drawn by the sound of raised voices. Jessica forced a smile and waved casually, pretending that everything was normal while her world collapsed around her. I prepared myself to be everything you needed, David. I learned your triggers so I could avoid them, studied your preferences so I could appeal to them, understood your fears so I could protect you from them. Everything I did was designed to make you happy and secure, by trapping me in a job I never wanted under a supervisor who stalks me, by destroying my financial independence and professional reputation, How is any of that designed to make me happy? Jessica's expression shifted again, this time to something resembling genuine confusion. It was as if she couldn't understand how her actions could be interpreted as anything other than loving and protective. You were lost, David, drifting between meaningless jobs, unable to commit to relationships, isolated and lonely. I gave you direction, purpose, stability. I created a structure where you could thrive under my guidance and protection. I created a prison. I created a sanctuary. The words came out as a desperate cry. I built a perfect environment where you would never have to face rejection or abandonment again, where someone would always be watching over you, caring about your well-being, ensuring your success. The tragic irony of her delusion was that Jessica genuinely believed she'd been saving me. Her mind, stalking was protection, control was care, and imprisonment was sanctuary. She'd constructed an elaborate fantasy where her criminal behavior became heroic and self-sacrificing. A knock at the office door interrupted our confrontation. Through the glass, I could see Kevin Park standing in the hallway, accompanied by two people in business suits who I didn't recognize. One of them was holding what appeared to be legal documents. It's Martinez. This is Kevin Park from Innovate. We need to speak with you immediately regarding some urgent legal matters. Jessica's face went completely white as she stared at the group gathered outside her office. She looked at me, then at the door, then back at me, her mind clearly racing, as she tried to understand how her carefully controlled situation had spiraled so completely out of her grasp. "You set me up," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of betrayal and admiration. "You recorded our conversation." I didn't deny it. There was no point in deception anymore, not when the truth was about to be revealed, regardless of my confirmation or denial. "Jessica, this was always going to end this way. The only question was how much additional damage you'd cause before someone stopped you." She moved to her desk and began frantically shuffling through papers, as if she could somehow find a document that would undo the legal consequences bearing down on her. Her movements were erratic and panicked, the composed professional mask finally completely abandoned. "I can fix this," she muttered, more to herself than to me. "I have connections, resources. I can make this go away, and we can start over somewhere else. Maybe Seattle, maybe Portland, somewhere fresh where we can build the relationship we were meant to have." Jessica opened the door. "This conversation is over." "No." She positioned herself between me and the door, her arms spread wide as if she could physically prevent reality from intruding into her fantasy. "David, you don't understand what they're going to do to me. They're going to destroy my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Is that really what you want? What I want is for you to face the consequences of your actions and get the help you clearly need." "Help." Jessica's laugh was bitter and broken. "David, you are my help. You're the only thing in my life that makes sense, the only person who makes me feel like I'm not completely alone in the world. Without you, I have nothing." The raw desperation in her voice was almost heartbreaking. But I couldn't allow myself to feel sympathy for someone who'd systematically destroyed my life and the lives of others. Jessica's loneliness and pain didn't excuse her criminal behavior or justify the trauma she'd inflicted. "Ms. Martinez, please open the door. We have a warrant for your arrest and need to speak with Mr. Chen as part of our ongoing investigation." The word arrest seemed to snap Jessica back to immediate reality. She stared at the door as if it were a portal to hell, then turned to me with an expression of absolute despair. "David, please, I'm begging you. Tell them this was all a misunderstanding, that you're happy here, that we worked everything out between us. I'll transfer you to a different department, find you a new supervisor, give you a promotion and raise. Anything you want, just please. Don't let them destroy me. I can't do that, Jessica. Too many people have been hurt by your actions. This has to stop." She stood frozen for a long moment, staring at me as if she was seeing me clearly for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and defeated.
"You never loved me at all, did you? Not even a little bit?"
"No, Jessica. Loved you. I was never interested in you romantically. I tried to tell you that clearly and directly, but you refused to accept it, because I knew that given time and the right circumstances, you would learn to love me. I was so patient, so careful, so devoted. How could you not eventually see how perfect we were together?" The door to her office opened without her permission. Kevin Park entered, followed by the two individuals in business suits who I now realize were probably federal agents. Behind them came Marcus Johnson himself, a tall man with silver hair and an expression of grim satisfaction. Jessica Martinez, you're under arrest for corporate espionage, wire fraud, stalking, and conspiracy. Now, you have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around Jessica's wrists, she looked at me one final time. The expression on her face was no longer angry or desperate, but something far more disturbing, a mixture of profound sadness and unwavering devotion that suggested her obsession would survive even imprisonment and criminal prosecution. "This isn't over, David," she said softly, as the agents led her toward the door. "Real love doesn't just disappear because of legal complications. I'll wait for you, however long it takes." Even as she was being arrested, even as her crimes were exposed and her freedom stripped away, Jessica Martinez was still living in her delusional fantasy where stalking was love and criminal behavior was romantic devotion. Watching her being led away in handcuffs, I realized that prison might protect me from her physically, but the psychological scars of her obsession would take much longer to heal. 3 months after Jessica's arrest, I found myself standing in the gleaming headquarters of Innovate Corp, looking out at the Austin skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the entire city. My new office was spacious and modern, with actual privacy and a door that I could close whenever I needed to focus on complex coding projects. The contrast with my cramped, surveilled workspace at TechFlow couldn't have been more dramatic. Marcus Johnson had been true to his word about the position and salary increase. But more importantly, he'd provided something I'd almost forgotten existed: a normal, professional work environment where supervisors respected boundaries and colleagues treated each other with basic human decency. The culture at Innovate Corp was collaborative rather than controlling, innovative rather than manipulative. Amanda Rodriguez had also made the transition to Innovate Corp, accepting a senior front-end developer position that came with both a substantial raise and genuine appreciation for her technical skills. During our first week at the new company, she'd apologized repeatedly for not intervening sooner in my situation with Jessica. "I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting," she explained over coffee in Innovate Corp's relaxed break room. "Workplace harassment is so common that sometimes you start questioning whether what you're seeing is actually as serious as it seems. You saved my life, Amanda. If you hadn't reached out to Kevin and his team, I'd probably still be trapped in Jessica's web of control." The legal proceedings against Jessica had moved swiftly once federal investigators began examining her digital activities. Kevin's team had discovered evidence of her targeting pattern going back over 5 years, involving at least 8 victims across 3 different companies. She'd perfected her methods over time, learning how to access personal information, manipulate employment situations, and maintain psychological control with increasing sophistication. The most disturbing revelation came from forensic analysis of her personal computers and phones. Jessica had maintained detailed files on each of her targets, complete with psychological profiles, daily schedules, personal preferences, and strategic plans for manipulation. She'd approached stalking with the methodical precision of a corporate consultant, treating human beings like business problems to be solved through careful research and strategic intervention. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the court-appointed psychiatrist who evaluated Jessica, diagnosed her with erotomania and narcissistic personality disorder with obsessive-compulsive features. In her report, Dr. Hayes described Jessica's behavior as representing a sophisticated form of predatory stalking that combined elements of romantic obsession with corporate manipulation. The defendant demonstrates an inability to accept rejection or acknowledge the autonomy of her targets, Dr. Hayes wrote. She genuinely believes that her intensive surveillance and control constitute expressions of love and care, making her particularly dangerous due to her complete lack of insight into the harmful nature of her actions. Jessica had been sentenced 2 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory psychiatric treatment. The judge had also issued a permanent restraining order, requiring her to maintain at least 500 yards distance from me at all times, with additional restrictions on digital communication and social media contact. During the sentencing, Hearing, Jessica had maintained her delusion right until the end. When given the opportunity to address the court, she'd spoken directly to me, her voice calm and eerily affectionate. "David, I know you're angry with me right now, and I understand why. I made mistakes in how I expressed my feelings, and I accept responsibility for the confusion I caused. But I want you to know that my love for you remains unchanged, and I'll spend every day of my incarceration working to become the woman you deserve. When I'm released, I hope you'll give us another chance to build the relationship we were meant to have, even facing years in prison." Even after months of legal proceedings that had thoroughly documented her crimes, Jessica continued to frame her stalking as romance and her imprisonment as a temporary obstacle to our destined relationship. The complete disconnect from reality was both fascinating and terrifying to witness. Lisa Thompson, InnovateCore's HR manager, had become an unexpected source of support during my transition to the new company. She'd worked with other employees who'd escaped toxic work environments and understood the psychological impact of prolonged manipulation and control. "Recovery from workplace abuse takes time," she explained during one of our regular check-in meetings. "You've been operating in survival mode for months, constantly alert for threats and manipulation. Learning to trust normal professional relationships again is a process." She was right. For weeks after starting at InnovateCore, I'd found myself analyzing every interaction for hidden meanings, searching for signs of manipulation or control in perfectly innocent conversations. The hypervigilance that had protected me from Jessica's escalating behavior had become a habit that was difficult to break. The financial settlement from TechFlow Solutions had been substantial. The company's insurance had covered significant damages for their negligent supervision of Jessica's behavior. With additional compensation for the intentional infliction of emotional distress, more importantly, TechFlow had implemented comprehensive new policies regarding workplace harassment and background checks for supervisory positions. 6 months after Jessica's sentencing, I received an unexpected visitor at InnovateCore. Kevin Park knocked on my office door, carrying a manila folder and wearing an expression of professional concern. "David, I have some news about Jessica that I thought you should hear directly from us rather than discovering through other channels." My stomach tightened as I gestured for him to sit down. Despite the restraining order and prison sentence, I'd remained constantly aware that Jessica's release would eventually come, bringing with it the possibility of renewed contact attempts. "She's been writing letters," Kevin explained, opening the folder to reveal thick stacks of handwritten pages. "Hundreds of them, addressed to you, to InnovateCore, to various members of our legal team. Prison officials have been intercepting them as violations of the restraining order, but the content suggests that her obsession has intensified rather than diminished during incarceration." The letters, Kevin explained, detailed elaborate plans for Jessica's post-release life that centered entirely around resuming her relationship with me. She'd apparently spent her time in prison researching legal loopholes, planning new approaches to contact, and developing strategies for what she termed rebuilding trust and communication. "We're working with federal authorities to extend the restraining order and ensure that any future contact attempts result in immediate rearrest," Kevin assured me. "But I wanted you to be aware that release doesn't necessarily mean the end of this situation." As I looked out at the Austin skyline from my office window, I realized that true freedom from Jessica's obsession might be an ongoing process rather than a destination I could reach and then forget about. Her delusion was so complete, her fixation so intense, that even years of separation and legal consequences might not be enough to break the hold I'd somehow gained over her disturbed mind. But I also realized that I was no longer alone in facing this challenge. I had genuine colleagues who cared about my well-being, legal protections that would be enforced, and most importantly, the knowledge that I could recognize and resist manipulation when it appeared in my life. The nightmare that began with an elevator encounter and a forced smile had taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, red flags, and the importance of trusting my instincts when something felt wrong. Jessica Martinez had tried to control my entire existence, but in the end, she'd only succeeded in making me stronger and more aware of my own worth. Standing in my office at InnovateCore, surrounded by the evidence of a career that was finally moving forward on my own terms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year. Genuine peace. Jessica's obsession might continue from behind bars, but my life belonged to me again. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.